Next up is Christian.
Right. So thanks everyone for having me here. I really wanted to talk about this game that I've been working on. And specifically, it's been going really deep into enemies with more personality, different inputs and animations, and how to make more hits with more impactful presence in your game. So quick table of contents, just go over an intro, some stuff about animation, AI behavior, and melee combat. I'm going to try to go fast because there's a lot in there. I could only cram in so much. So quick brief about me. In my day job, I'm a software developer. I work in education with educational simulations and game-based education as well. So we primarily use Unity to build all these simulations and these interactive environments. And it goes over different types of manufacturing processes as well. So it's a lot of like in the weeds technical stuff. But by passion, I love making games. And specifically, I love making third-person action games. And a lot of these are in Unreal, because I really wanted to learn Unreal since my day job is just purely Unity all the time, every time. So I wanted to pick up Unreal and C++ and have a better understanding of how that engine works. So this is the game I've been working on for the last few months called Crazy Arena Chaos, where I have specifically been super diving into how do I make these hits and these actions feel more impactful, and how does it feel like you're really playing some of these older games that I grew up with or still love to play today. So my inspiration came a lot from these games, like Kingdom Hearts, Hi-Fi Rush, Ratchet & Clank, where the combat feels really, really good. It feels like you're actually in there playing a game. And how the enemies react, all the stuff that happens with the player is just amazing and feels great to me. So during the development, there were a lot of ups, a lot of really fun times. But there was a lot of downs too, where stuff didn't work. And getting into Unreal and understanding everything that the system does, there's a lot I kind of wish I knew before going into it, and that this presentation has kind of influenced of what went wrong during that development and how to rectify those things, as well as how to make things a bit better in your games. So what I learned, basically going from a prototype where you getting your Mixamo animations offline, you put it in your game, you get stuff working, to an actual interactive environment with enemies that feel much more like they're trying to kill you and trying to coordinate with each other as well. This is everything I've learned in a much more condensed format. So the first thing I learned was replacing animations, not as easy as I thought, especially when you are trying to use a Mixamo rig from your prototype and going to use a Rigify rig to do your animations. So again, a lot of like beginner stuff that I was picking up as I went on it. So the first thing I learned is that Unreal Engine uses centimeters. It's a bit hard to see, but yeah, I had to set my world scale down to 0.01. Otherwise, everything breaks once you bring it into Unreal. So you have to know and understand that before you start doing your animations on your rig. And even though all the measurements are correct, like 1.75 meters, that's great, everything's great. If you start out with the world scale at 1 and then try to scale it correctly, your entire rig collapses on itself once you've made those animations. So if anyone knows a different way or approach to do this, I'd love to hear it too, because this took me by surprise and kind of wiped a few weeks off of development for me. So when you're a beginner, usually most people go into Blender, they boot up Rigify, they start trying to do their rig animations. But if you try to bring that into Unreal with your Mixamo animations from the prototyping stage, it does not like the retargeting. So you either have to do all your animations with the Rigify rig, or go back and use a Mixamo rig, which is what I ended up doing, because before the Rigify rig, much more condensed Mixamo rig, that made it a lot easier, because the retargeting system in Unreal, while it's super useful, because it lets you take one skeleton and use your animations on another skeleton. If they're inconsistent, there are ways around it, but the ways around it were not working for me and took way too much development time. So I would just stick with a Mixamo rig that you can find online from Mixamo's website for Blender specifically. So the next part, diving more into combat with enemies, because my enemies were a little bit lackluster starting out. They had a very basic, they run after you. Once they get close enough to you, they attack. That's it. There was no thought to them. It was just go after player, attack, that's it. So I really wanted a more dynamic system that I felt like was present in a lot of those games that I mentioned earlier. So diving more into AI controllers or behavior trees as well is kind of where that bread and butter exists for creating more of a presence from your characters. I've seen this used around quite generally, but I've never dived into it as much as this, where Unreal is really nice in their behavior trees, where kind of your decision will have like a different flow, and then you can have your specific tasks as blocks here. So when you hit your conditional here, it'll just execute all these tasks. So you can have little pieces of script in there that says, okay, do this task, now do this task, now do this, if you're in this condition, which was really nice. Unreal, out of the box, also has an AI perception, which is really useful. You're not having to go in and actually code this stuff yourself. The one I use specifically is the AI site perception, which will create all these bounding boxes that lets you know, okay, someone has entered my cone of view or my radius. Now I have the stimulus of this other actor in my scene, so I know I have reference specifically to this thing. And then it also has ways to figure out, okay, have I gone out of range or has my target gone out of range? So I use that quite a lot. There's also, new to me, the environmental query system, which is apparently experimental inside of Unreal, but this allows your AI to actually query the space around you, and you can specify what's the determining factors from your AI as well, so that this specific case, if you look at like the green dot, that is like the highest target value that that character or AI will go to. The red is like lower chance and lower weighted, so you can start to do a lot of dynamic stuff with that to make them move around a lot more fluently and have a better understanding of their areas. AI directors, I found out, were a thing too. I've heard about them, but I've never really understood how they work. So in this case that I found, one of the things that happens is when an enemy is actually all together or it has a reference of all the enemies around you in your zone, if one starts attacking you, then it will not queue up the next enemy until the other one has finished attacking. So I did bump that up a bit though, so that 3 can be going at once. So it feels like your other AIs will wait and kind of position themselves and feel like they're coordinating together to position themselves around you as well, which ended up being a lot more fun and less overwhelming for the player, and it ended up being like a huge godsend to not just feel like, oh my god, I just run and occasionally hit, like going guerrilla tactics. So going a bit back, or going into after that, is kind of deeper into attacks after the AI. So the first thing I learned is that in Unreal, you can break up your attack sequence into a montage where you can specify like, okay, here's attack 1, here's attack 2, here's attack 3. So if you have kind of a chained combo attack system, that's an animation that goes over time. You can break it up so that you can queue up, okay, I'm through attack 2 here. And inside these montages as well, you can hit flags in here that will tell whatever actor this animation is running on to do specific things. So this would be how you turn on like your hitboxes and your colliders and turn on like your different input buffers as well to be able to go through different combo attacks. One thing that I was not liking was that when I would attack, my player would stand still. So an enemy would be like walking away from you and you'd be like, oh my god, I just tried to hit you and now you're gone. Things aren't connecting. It felt really bad. So once I started going through some of the older games and looking at them, it was apparent that the player a lot of the time was actually being pulled towards the enemy so that the hits actually connected and it felt more weighty, like you're always going to hit, and it didn't feel like very underwhelming when you swung and nothing happened because they were already gone. So you're able to just raycast a cone in front of you and check, okay, did I hit someone? Did I hit an enemy? If so, warp me in front of that enemy. Then I learned hit stops were apparently a thing. No idea before. But this is a super cool effect that makes it when you actually land your hit, both the player and the enemy or whoever you're attacking will stop. It'll stutter for a second, make it feel much more weighty and impactful. And then, whoop, can I go back? There we go. And then feel much more like dynamic as you're going through it. And you can either slow down your player, you can speed them up, you can do a bunch of different stuff with those hit stop effects, but it definitely added a lot. Then there's visual effects. So initially I had kind of like just a small little spark, but then I found that using a bunch of collision particles inside Unreal's engine felt so much better to be able to leave some scrap behind on the actual floor for the enemies that you were hitting around. So that just all made everything just jump so much from like my rinky-dink prototype that was working to an actual combat system that felt like I was really engaged with the system. But yeah, that's it. Feel free to contact me, especially if you have Unreal stuff that I am doing completely wrong. I would love to know how I'm doing it completely wrong. And there's also some resources on how I learned this combat stuff down here, and some of my devlog I put together while I was going through. Yes.
I like this game so much. How did you find your teammates?
So I found them through DevPods.
I did not see that coming.
So this is a game I led with DevPods specifically because, like, one of the scenarios Chris talked about, that I professionally work just on simulations and stuff, but this is stuff I love. This is stuff I love so much and wanted to learn, really wanted to get a deep understanding of. And I'd say this project will be coming out in March, but it started only in October, mid-October.
The whole thing started in October?
Yes.
Wow.
Like a little bit of prototyping beforehand just to give people an idea. And even Chris sent me the video of the initial prototype where it's just hitting a cylinder and it disappears and that's it. But what's so great about DevPods too is they push you to, okay, your games are releasing. What is the main stuff you need to get in to have this be an actual published game? So it gives you kind of different lens of what needs to be in there and what doesn't. Yes.
I was really surprised to hear you say that EQS is still experimental, because I think we shipped a game with it 6 years ago.
Which, it was labeled experimental.
No. Props to Unreal for not taking that tag off.
Gmail still beta.
But my question about EQS is, it runs asynchronously, right? Like, you tell it to go do something, and then it gets back to you sometime. And I'm curious, did you have any issues with that as far as your combat or your AI with, like, interfacing between the, like, I want to run this animation now and I don't know where I'm going? Or like a frame or two.
I don't have a picture of it, but in the actual behavior tree is when it sets up a task to actually run the EQS system. So the behavior tree will do the query first, send the position to the enemy, and then the enemy AI will be like, okay, I go over there, and then it'll do its animations. But it never, like, stops itself if it's in the middle of an attack animation or getting hit, which is nice too. So it'll query up the position, but it won't do anything with it until it's being told, use that actual position.
Okay, cool, thanks.
I might be doing it wrong though, so.
No. Good answer, thanks.
Yes.
So comparing Unity and Unreal, do you think that the game that you made was easier to make in Unreal versus Unity?
Unreal has like a drastic learning curve, but once you understand all the tools, I think Unreal has a much better tool set to be able to create those games. Unity, I found myself creating a lot of, like, the character controller out of the box in Unity works, but in Unreal it really works, and it's really nice. They have an apply damage out of the box too, which is really nice. I didn't use it, but it works if you do. And it has like a damage modifier type too, where you can specify like elements. So they go pretty in depth into stuff. Yes.
Thanks. So my main question is about enemy AI. I didn't know about that whole system either. I'm not on the coding side. I know about like hit stop and things like that.
Yeah.
I'm a big fighting game fan and stuff. Does your game have multiple types of enemies with different AI priorities?
Yes.
Cool. In that case, how did you decide on the different the different types of enemmies you'd have? Like close range brawler, long range poking guy,
Yes.
that sort of stuff.
So,
How'd you decide those?
like I said, I kind of knew my game needed to be shipped. I wanted like just one character. Low scope is always great. Wanted to get my one melee character in there. They'd come in, they'd hit me, they'd do damage. But then as I only had that one character and I started looking back at all the other games, the ranged unit was really integral to those fights because that makes you way more aware of like, I can't only look at what's in front of me. I need to be aware of what could be coming at me, and actually makes it a much more dynamic fight because then you're not just running away from people trying to catch you, you're trying to avoid while you're in combat as well. And that was one of the issues with the AI director that I'm still trying to deal with too, is that it would be great that it's not all collective of enemies, but it tells it like, okay, one melee could be attacking, one range can be attacking.
Yeah.
So trying to differentiate those would be really great too.
Cool. Thanks so much.
Yes.
One other question, which is, what was your split between doing work in Blueprints versus in C++?
So I started the project specifically going for C++. So it was like everything was in C++, understand C++. But it slowed down the development a lot. So I started kind of as it's getting towards shipping date, moving over to Blueprints more just because it's easier and faster to prototype and get stuff in and debug, especially if you are hitting compile every time and waiting for the engine, which you have to remember to hit compile every time. So I started veering a bit more off of C++ and into Blueprints, but I did find that if you're ever trying to figure out how to use C++ in Unreal Engine, you can just double click on all the blueprint nodes and it'll take you to the actual implementation, and you can just learn that way from doing it that way.
Yay!